Welcome to YouTube channel 24. I'm Anastasia Noritsina, and today we're joined by Sergei Jirnov, former KGB and Russian Foreign Intelligence Service member. Hello, it's a pleasure to welcome you. Hello, it's a pleasure, and hello to all of our viewers as well. Today, July 29th, there was an explosion at the largest chemical plant in Germany. 14 people are injured, Bild reports. In France on Monday night, unidentified assailants have damaged carrier networks in 6 departments. It looks like we are close to WW3 today. For the last 3 weeks, there have been sabotage attacks all over Europe, and it appears that Russia is behind these explosions. Sergei Olegovich, what do you think about this? Is Russia really provoking the West on purpose? About the Third World War, let's not scare our viewers, especially in the evening or morning, depending on when someone will watch this video. Although international tensions do exist, I would even add to this the situation in the Middle East, the Hamas attack on Israel, Erdogan's statements about Turkish troops entering Israel. This really brings us closer to a world war, although whether to call it a third or fourth war is a question. I believe it will be the fourth, because the third one has already happened, but it was a cold one, from 1946 to 1991, when the Soviet Union and the bloc of Eastern European countries collapsed. As for the 2 explosions you mentioned, they fit into the overall context. Let me remind you that there were traffic disruptions in France on Friday, and it was determined that these were the results of sabotage. We are talking about the purposeful defacement of fiber optic cables, which of course affects the telecommunications operators. Nevertheless, it has not led to the complete disappearance of the internet in any region.
И как только это произошло, в понедельник стали говорить о том, что 6 операторов, значит, в 6 регионах у операторов сотовой связи чувствовались какие-то сбои, и было констатировано, что там были проведены диверсии. Речь идет именно о диверсиях, то есть действительно это целенаправленная порча оптиковолоконных кабелей, которые, естественно, сказываются сразу на работе операторов. Ну, там не привело это к перебоям интернету полностью, то есть нет было ни одного региона, где исчез, например, интернет.
More often than not, it caused internet slowdowns, because when fiber optic cables are damaged in one place, the entire stream is rerouted to another location, which slows things down. The explosion probably falls in line with the railroad story. True, the investigation is leaning toward it being a sabotage, most likely by extreme left-wing activists opposed to capitalism and technological progress. These people probably had previous involvement with the railroad, as they knew exactly how and where to damage the infrastructure. Just like with fiber optic cables, there is a sense of professionalism here too.
Против всего что угодно. И это люди, которые, скорее всего, раньше имели отношение к работе на железной дороге, потому что они знали, как конкретно где что перебивать. Вот точно так же, как с этими с оптиковолоконными кабелями, здесь вроде тоже чувствовалась профессиональная рука.
Now, the question arises here. Is there really no connection with the Russian Federation behind this? You know, they're already joking about it in France, because they say that if you look at the way the Russian security services have organized terrorist attacks and assassinations over the last 20 years, they've often failed. It looks too professionally organized for the Russian security services, and it's causing laughter, irony, and sarcasm in France. Everything looks too well made, and one usually remembers how Russian special services in boots with Kalashnikov rifles or with parachutes trailing behind them walked around London. Here, however, everything looks too qualitative. As for the explosion at the German plant, it is not yet known whether it should be put on a par with other cases, since it is a chemical production facility. which is always classified as hazardous and explosive. There is safety equipment and measures are taken to ensure safety in this production. But because the production itself is complex and can carry great risks, we even have a classification called SOESO, where there are categories 1, 2, and so on. In principle, when there is an explosion in a chemical plant, it does not always mean that there has been sabotage, because it is not a pie factory where a gas cylinder in a booth can explode. We will follow the investigation. So far, it does not say anything about the specific perpetrators or causes of the explosion. In such an environment, when there is an international event that the Russian Federation does not like very much, and suddenly, against the background of this event, suspicious incidents start to appear. Whether it is sabotage or disconnections or targeted acts of disabling railroad tracks and fiber optic cables, it is, of course, tense and makes you think. Although, you know, if you watch the news feed, there are always some extraordinary cases.
По выведению из строя железнодорожных путей, оптиковолоконных кабелей и где-то какие-то несчастные случаи, то, в общем, конечно, это напрягает и заставляет подумать. Вот. Хотя вот, вы знаете, если смотреть ленту новостей, то в ленте...
They will never write that another baby was born today weighing 3,600 pounds. The mom is happy because nobody cares about that.
Там очередной ребенок с весом 3,60, 3 килограмма 600 грамм.
But if 12 babies died in one maternity hospital at once, it's bound to end up in the news feed. If you read the news feed, you will always come across gruesome events, because that's the way media logic works. And you say that the sabotage on the railroad and with the cell phone operators is hardly connected with the Russian Federation, because they didn't screw up, but they did with a food blogger who bragged about his FSB credentials. Is this Putin's way of trying to disrupt the Olympics? Well, you see, this is clearly a sign of some unprofessional behavior. A drunken cook in Bulgaria brags about his FSB badge, shows it to everyone, and at the same time comes to France saying that he will disrupt the whole Olympics. He also said a strange phrase that the world has never seen such an opening of the Olympics. In this, he hit the mark, because indeed, such an opening was unique.
Он сказал, еще мир такого открытия Олимпиады еще ни разу не видел. Вот, но здесь он попал в точку, потому что просто такое открытие еще...
Never before has an Olympics been held on water, on ships, with the participation of various very informal characters. It stirred up the world community, from the Pope and Elon Musk to Marine Le Pen, Putin, Peskov, and other propagandists.
Абсолютно всю какую-то мракобесную общественность мировую, там, начиная от Папы Римского, Илона Маска, я не знаю, там, у нас Марион Маришаль Ле Пен, там, Путина, Пескова.
In this sense, this cook really guessed, because the world has not seen such a discovery yet. This opening can be compared to a litmus test, as in Ukraine. If a person says that Crimea is Ukrainian, he is a normal person, and if Crimea is Russian, he is an abnormal person. The Olympic ceremony became such a litmus test. If a person likes it, they are a normal, progressive, and broad-minded democratic person. And if they don't, they are something completely backward. That's just the way it is. As for the blogger, the story is a strange one, and I think that what we are told is not always true, especially in the context of an investigation.
Потому что я так думаю, что на самом деле то, что нам рассказывают, вот когда нам рассказывают какое-то расследование.
This may be a cover-up operation by intelligence agencies to keep the source of the leak from being revealed and publicized. In such a case, when someone tells a story while drunk, it diverts attention away from the real source of the leak. Getting back to France and the sabotage of railroads, cell phone service, and a food blogger, what is the mood among the public? You live in France? You know better. Isn't the public outraged and demanding retribution? No, it's July. French society is on vacation, and the only thing they're interested in is to get to the seaside as soon as possible, to have good weather and lots of fun. It is not for them to concern themselves with such matters. It is only those who cannot go on vacation or on vacation who stay online and express their discontent through comments on social networks. When there was disruption in the railroads on Friday, it was serious, as around 700,000 passengers were affected by the disruption. Some didn't make it to Paris, some couldn't leave Paris, some couldn't get through somewhere else.
Вот они сидят в сетях и, значит, выражают свое недовольство через такие комментарии в соцсетях. Вот. Ну, когда у нас были перебои, конечно, железнодорожные в пятницу, это была серьезная штука, потому что у нас в этот день примерно 800 тысяч пассажиров оказались затронуты этими сбоями. Вот. И кто-то не доехал до Парижа, кто-то не смог уехать из Парижа, кто-то не смог.
But you know, there is an old story that was recalled recently. A country is valued not when there are no thieves or thievery in it, but when there are law enforcement agencies effectively fighting theft. It's the same story with France and all the sabotage. The problem is not whether there are these sabotages or not.
Вот и такая же история с Францией, со всеми этими диверсиями. Проблема не в том, что есть эти диверсии,
but in how quickly the country can deal with the consequences of these sabotages. France has proven its ability to cope with the consequences of such accidents. Within a day, half of the trains on these routes started running. After 2 days, 75%, on some routes up to 90% of trains, and after 3 days, all trains are running normally again. This just proves the country's ability to cope with the consequences of accidents, even if they are not related to the human factor, not created by malicious people, whether Russian or non-Russian, or just oppositionists.
Даже если не делают какие-то злоумышленники, там российские, не российские или просто какие-то оппозиционеры. Вот. У нас, кстати, во Франции, вот я вам должен сказать, что вот эта самая сеть скоростных поездов, когда ее строили, то для нее нужны специальные дороги, и там нужно обеспечивать безопасность, то есть довольно много людей оказались лишены своей...
By the way, in France, when the high-speed train network was being built, it required special roads, and security had to be ensured. As a result, many people were deprived of their property. Plots were either confiscated or taken away with compensation, which, in their opinion, was below market value. As a result, we have quite a few highly dissatisfied people who are unhappy with the availability of this high-speed train network. Some people think that they are too dull, others that they spoil the landscape of wonderful France. There are some eccentric people who are ready to organize sabotage even against such modern inventions. For example, the same windmills that produce electricity cause active resistance among some people. So you should not immediately look for a Russian trace everywhere. Although I have to say that Russia is certainly interested in making internal discontent in France, for example, more radical. Russia is definitely interested in that.
Хотя я вам должен сказать, что, конечно, Россия заинтересована в том, чтобы вот все эти недовольные, внутренние недовольные, там, допустим, во Франции, чтобы они проявляли свое недовольство более радикальным способом. Вот в этом точно совершенно Россия заинтересована.
If it is confirmed that Russian Federation is involved in these operations, France can respond in various ways. Special operations, as a rule, remain secret, so no one will talk about it. It is possible that actions will be carried out about which the French will then say that it is none of their business, and you have problems. If it is proved, or at least suspected, that Russian intelligence services were involved in the operations, France can file lawsuits, mobilize public opinion and international organizations, and generally take steps to combat the situation. An example is the case of June 1st, 2021, when the United States experienced global blackouts in various areas.
То есть, безусловно, будет с этим бороться примерно так же, как вот вы помните 1 июня 2021 года, когда какие-то, значит, были отключения электроэнергии в Соединенных Штатах Америки, такие глобальные, иногда областями некоторыми, иногда в некоторых
airports and railroads. Biden then made the claim to Putin.
Несколько аэропортов или несколько железнодорожных направлений, или несколько там светофоров где-то переставали работать, то Байден Путину предъявил претензию.
He stated that our investigation shows these hacker attacks are originating from the Russian Federation. Intelligence confirms they're coming from your territory. Biden urged Putin to stop these attacks during their June 1st, 2021 meeting in Geneva. Since then, there have been no major attacks on U.S. infrastructure, as Biden warned of mirrored responses if they continued. Whether Biden meant what he said and whether Putin took it seriously, the fact remains that there have been no more such attacks in the United States. Thus, this issue can be dealt with in a similar manner. If France proves that Russian Federation is behind these sabotage attacks, it has both the technical and material means to respond. I am certainly not an investigator, but I realize that Russia is not excluded in this. We see that not only in France, but also in other EU countries, there are constant explosions in warehouses and firing ranges. If we consider the West as a whole, how long can it tolerate such sabotage on its territory, and what kind of response can the collective West give?
И мы видим, что не только во Франции, но и в других странах Европейского Союза постоянно что-то взрывается, какие-то склады, какие-то полигоны. И вот если брать Запад в целом, то как долго он может терпеть такие диверсии на своей территории, и какой может быть ответ от коллективного Запада?
The West has a rather high threshold of sensitivity, i.e., it does not want to specifically escalate this issue. The West will be engaged in attempts at settlement first at the level of secret negotiations, then in bilateral negotiations with the Russian Federation. Someday that patience may exceed a threshold. The West tends to do that in principle, which is a weakness of democracies, because democracies don't really dare to use thuggish methods of fighting against thugs. Sometimes, for example, the United States of America, you may recall, uses such methods. For example, the prison in Cuba, from the point of view of American law, is considered illegal, because if one were to try all those in that prison, they could not be convicted inside the United States under democratic rules of justice. They would have to be released. They are being held without trial.
Незаконной тюрьмой, да, потому что ее для этого, кстати, вынесли на Кубу, потому что если бы судить всех этих людей, которые там содержало Соединенные Штаты Америки, то их не смогли бы осудить внутри Соединенных Штатов Америки по правилам правосудия демократического, американского, их надо было бы тогда отпускать. Вот, то есть их держали без суда и следствия. Вот, были известные истории, когда были подпольные...
The CIA is known to have held prisons in Poland, Egypt, and other countries when the U.S. could not effectively respond to the Islamic threat with democratic methods. So, these types of struggles were used. This was an exception. Also worth mentioning is the story of the Israelis who were and still are searching for Nazi criminals.
И тогда допускались такие виды борьбы. Вот. Но это в виде исключения. Я вам напомню, опять же, такая же история с израильтянами.
When they could not get them extradited or simply snatch them, they killed them wherever they were. This is a well-known story that the Israelis do not hide, even proud of it, claiming to follow the principle of tooth for tooth, eye for eye, as written in the Old Testament.
Вот. Это известная история, и, в общем, израильтяне даже ее не очень скрывают, они даже из этого сделали целую свою такую предмет гордости. Они говорят, что мы, в общем, не прощаем, и, так сказать, у нас...
Russia complained to America about Ukraine preparing some kind of covert operation.
Россия пожаловалась Америке на подготовку Украиной какой-то тайной операции, пишет
New York Times reports that in July, Russian Defense Minister Belousov urgently called Pentagon Secretary Austin, claiming Russia had discovered a covert Ukrainian operation with U.S. involvement, and asked if the Pentagon knew about it and how it might escalate tensions. Pentagon officials were surprised, but then the Americans contacted the Ukrainians and said, if you are going to do something like this, don't do it. What do you think about such contacts between Moscow and the Kremlin? How do you feel about this material? It didn't appear by chance. Yes, I saw this material. I believe that this story even had a sequel. The Ukrainians did not heed the American warnings and carried out special operations of their own. For me, these special operations are connected with strikes on 3 airfields of Russia's strategic aviation, where bombers capable of carrying nuclear weapons are based. These are Engels 2, Dyagilevo, and another airfield, Olenogorsk, near Murmansk.
И вот это, с моей точки зрения, вот об этой операции шел разговор, потому что это удар по стратегическим объектам. Российская Федерация их рассматривает ядерную, значит, эту самую бомбардировку.
From my view, these strikes were significant as they targeted strategic facilities. The Russian Federation sees its nuclear bombers as crucial to its nuclear triad, so such attacks are particularly sensitive. Additionally, a strike on a radar station within Russia's nuclear threat tracking system compounds the issue. The fact that the strikes were carried out shows that the Russian Defense Ministry tried to stop them and influence the operations through Washington or the Pentagon, but it failed. Intelligence officials claim that a Tu-22M3 strategic bomber, which Putin allegedly flew, was allegedly damaged during this attack. This bomber is very important to Russia. If Belousov occasionally calls Austin, does that mean the U.S. is really afraid of the Kremlin and can call Ukraine at his request to ask them to cancel operations? Putin flew a Tu-160 that burned up a month after his flight.
А вот если все-таки Белоусов звонит иногда Остину, то неужели США насколько боятся Кремль, что по их просьбе они могут позвонить Украине и попросить отменить все операции?
Ну, Путин летал на Ту-160, и этот Ту-160 сам собой сгорел через месяц после того, как Путин на нем летал.
My impression is that this is the result of their carelessness and bad airplanes, not sabotage by Ukraine. Unfortunately for the Special Operations Forces. Yes, there was indeed talk of this Tu-22M3 being defeated, but it's not necessarily the one Putin was flying. It's not like the U.S. is specifically afraid and can't sleep because of it.
США не то, что специально прям боятся, и что спать не могут по поводу этого дела.
But it is part of a global system of nuclear deterrence between the major nuclear powers. Roughly speaking, there is an unspoken and sometimes explicit agreement enshrined in several nuclear nonproliferation and reduction treaties that these powers will not take action against each other.
В нескольких договорах там по нераспространению или наоборот по сокращению ядерного оружия, что эти державы не будут предпринимать против друг друга.
First, they will be the first to strike with nuclear forces, and second, they will not wage any special struggle in this strategic area. Because for each country, a strike on such a strategic area is perceived as extremely painful, affecting national security and potentially leading to a worldwide nuclear conflict. Therefore, in this sense, the U.S. is simply over-insuring itself. They do not want Moscow to get the impression that this initiative comes from the United States, that the United States, as a nuclear power with almost the same nuclear potential as the Russian Federation, is purposefully engaged in weakening Russia's nuclear potential. That is why the Russians are calling the Americans, and the Americans are reacting quite sensitively to such calls. And on another development, the GUAR commented on the defeat of the Wagnerites in Mali. The rebels received more than just information that allowed them to conduct a successful military operation against Russian war criminals, GUAR spokesman Andrei Yusov said. He did not disclose details, adding that it would become more difficult for the Kremlin to solve geopolitical and economic issues after the whole world saw the real potential. What do you think of the elimination of the Wagnerians in Mali? Who is involved here? Some Russian media wrote that it could have been done by the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation or the Russian Foreign Intelligence Service. Now, there are many versions about it. The main thing is that the fact of the attack and serious losses has already been confirmed. Although the exact casualty figures vary from 20 to 80 people, and equipment was damaged, the fact of the operation itself is confirmed, and there is no doubt. However, the versions differ. According to one version, it was a localized operation conducted by the Tuaregs against the official troops of Mali with the support of Wagner. According to other versions, the Ukrainians may have helped the Tuaregs, or the Russians themselves may have been settling scores with the Wagnerites. Сами россияне сводят счеты с вагнеровцами. Здесь эти версии, сейчас их будет гулять огромное количество. Many versions will be circulating now. Ukraine does not hide its presence on the African continent and has even mentioned involvement in an incident involving the loss of equipment, possibly in the Central African Republic or Sudan. То ли какой-то техники в Центральноафриканской Республике или в Судане, я уж не помню точно. То есть в этом смысле и самое главное, что другое, что здесь идет разговор о наемниках, о... The main point is that it is about the mercenaries and troops of the junta that rules in Mali. This is not surprising since they came with weapons to the African continent and received military retaliation. There is nothing unusual about this. This is an absolutely normal situation in the sense that this is war. If civilians, women, old people, or children had been killed as a result of this operation, we could ask questions. But the fact that 80 Wagner mercenaries were killed, well, good riddance to them. They knew what they were getting into when they signed contracts as mercenaries. They wanted the money and adrenaline of participating in such operations abroad and ended up getting a bullet in the forehead or shrapnel. From a military point of view, there is almost nothing to discuss here. The Tuaregs have proven that they are good warriors and can fight their enemies effectively. Later, Malian rebels offered to give the Wagner captives to Ukraine, thus expressing support for the Ukrainian people in their fight against their common enemy, Russia. What do you think about it? Could the transfer of the Wagnerians be linked to the decision to support Ukraine? We have to take into account that there are still very few facts. These are versions that can be both fakes on the Russian and Ukrainian sides. We should be cautious about these versions. If the rebels are handing over Russian prisoners, it is probably due to the fact that Russia will not pay for them, as they are of no interest to it. These are mercenaries who knew what they were doing. Очень надо аккуратно сейчас поговорить про эти версии. Но опять же, вот если, значит, эти повстанцы отдают этих российских пленных, потому что, строго говоря, за них Россия платить не будет. Они абсолютно никого не интересуют, потому что это наемники, которые, так сказать, знали, за что они подписываются, они знали. То есть это не регулярная армия, это не какие-то там штирлицы, да, за которых там стоит государство. They are not part of the regular army, which the state is fighting to get them back. If they are kept in prisons, they could rot there for 20 or 30 years, and Russia will do nothing to free them. This is not a contingent for which the Russian state will take any action.
Не тот контингент, ради которого будет там российское государство, если исходить из того, что оно существует, оно в принципе мы.
Even on the battlefield, the regular army does not take its wounded, collect the corpses, and inform the relatives of the deaths so as not to pay money. Therefore, there is no doubt that these mercenaries were of no value to the Tuaregs. They are of value to Ukraine because they can be exchanged for Ukrainian prisoners. What are the Wagnerians doing in Africa anyway? Are they guarding the rich fields, or are they performing another task? First, every Wagnerian who goes to Africa does so to make money for himself personally. The question is what Russia gets from this. And for Russia, nothing either. Wagner is formally a private company from the point of view of the Russian Federation. The owners of this company, formerly Prigozhin and now others, are solving their commercial problems. In fact, it's all nonsense. In reality, Wagner is part of the main intelligence directorate of the General Staff of the Russian Federation and is probably also overseen by the Ministry of Defense. Although the Wagnerians themselves are not considered Russian military personnel and do not give rise to obligations for the Russian armed forces or the state, they bring preferential treatment and profit to the Russian Federation. Now they are being watched closely because Prigozhin used to be just Putin's wallet. And I think the Wagnerites are still that wallet. They just have a new manager. What does Russia have to lose if the Wagnerites in Africa are exposed?
Ну, то есть, а что потеряет Россия, если, например, в Африке всех вагнеровцев разгромят?
Russia will lose formally its prestige, although it claims that it has nothing to do with Wagner. Roughly speaking, it will say that this has no consequences for the Russian Federation because it is just a private company doing its own thing. If things go badly for the company, so much the worse for it. If more successfully, Russia can be a little proud that the Wagnerians have been successful in Africa. As you correctly pointed out, they are technically doing two things, either guarding dictators or being trainers, teaching someone to kill. But at the same time, they are getting money both for themselves personally and probably for the corrupt chain leading up to Vladimir Putin. If this chain is broken, Putin will lose one of his wallets and personal income, and Putin's friends will also lose their solid incomes. The Russian Federation may lose what little prestige it still has left because it claims Wagner has nothing to do with it.
Но когда мы видим, что Вагнер воевал в Украине, теперь у Российской Федерации, кстати, такой возможности отрицать это нету, и больше того, Путин в этом смысле совершил просто...
However, when we see that Wagner was fighting in Ukraine, the Russian Federation has no way to deny it. Moreover, Putin committed an act of idiocy when, being angry at Prigozhin, after the mutiny, he publicly admitted that it was his money, the Russian state's money. He actually admitted to using mercenaries on behalf of the Russian state. Of course, he will be offended that one of his wallets is less full than before. Sergey Olegovich, thank you for the insightful conversation and your time. Have a great day. To our viewers, please like, comment, and subscribe. Let us know your city and country to help us improve and expand our content.
Подписывайтесь на наши YouTube-каналы, ну и не забывайте указывать, с какого вы города, с какой страны. Нам очень интересно знать, где нас смотрят, где слышат, ну и таким образом будем расширять нашу географию.
Thank you all for listening. Good news, and see you soon.